Realistic Randy, Mediokr at Best Sports Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. The latest of news with your Minnesota Vikings squad as of Friday morning, and there's been no news, no changes since then going into today, Saturday. And for all we know, hell, the way that sports works, that after this podcast, some news may go down. We'll have to see. But as of Friday morning, according to Ian Rappaport, contract extension talks or contract negotiation talks to lower that $7.6 million cap hit of Kyle Rudolph on your Vikings squad. Contract negotiations between those two parties, the Vikings and Kyle Rudolph's camp, have came to a screeching halt. So apparently a trade may be on the horizon for Kyle Rudolph. Now, that is to say, unless the Vikings front office, Rick Spielman and company, decide to do a complete 180 and go after trading away an Xavier Rhodes or Trey Waynes. Those two names have also been attached throughout this offseason as far as, players that have a relatively high cap hit that may need a restructure in order for the team to sign their draft picks. And, it's interesting. Although I personally wouldn't mind trading away Xavier Rhodes, I've mentioned that quite a few times already, I could see why. And I actually would kind of support Mike Zimmer if he were to go up to Rick Spielman and shut that stuff down with Rick Spielman and just be like, look, I sat back in the draft all throughout draft weekend, okay? I sat back and you went completely offense, 100% offense in the draft. Normally we go after defensive players high early on in the draft, but we didn't do that at all. We took defensive players late in the draft and undrafted free agents. But as far as players that are going to have any type of contribution that we expect, whether it's a major piece of contribution or even if it's just a little piece of contributing to the team, it's all 100% offense. I sat back, I bit my tongue, I was quiet, I dealt with it fine. Now you mean to tell me you're about to go ahead and attempt to trade one of my cornerbacks? Absolutely not. So I could see why Mike Zimmer would say, to hell with that. You're not doing that at all. But apparently a trade with Kyle Rudolph, it just needs to happen. And I said this on Thursday's podcast on Score North, where I talked about, listen, right now, as of the time of that recording, the Minnesota Vikings had $870,000 in cap space available. That's not going to get it done to sign your draft pick, Garrett Bradbury. They've signed pretty much all their draft picks except for Garrett Bradbury, center out of NC State, 18th pick overall, okay? And I said, I'm like, this is no reason to panic right now, but hopefully this doesn't develop into a story or into something bigger or a distraction as the time goes on, the longer that Garrett Bradbury remains unsigned. And who's to say that the Vikings' initial offer that Garrett Bradbury and his camp will accept it? Who knows? We'll have to see. But the longer that Garrett Bradbury isn't signed with the team, this could potentially develop into a distraction. Got a little bit of flack for it, talking about this isn't a distraction, Randy. The Vikings simply need to free up cap space. Whether this isn't about Garrett Bradbury holding out or anything like that, they just simply need to free up cap space, and that's it. Stop trying to reach for a story. Well, guess what, folks? Distractions aren't limited to just the players, whether they're holding out for a better deal. Distractions are anything that prevents the public or the media to think about or, go after a team or conjure up any ideas when it comes to that team about that particular sport. Anything that involves that team outside of the sport itself is a distraction. So whether it's caused by the player holding out or whether it's caused by miscommunication or kind of fumbling the ball around as the front office or as the organization itself. In this case, it's the team. You could have brought back Everson Griffin with a lower cap hit than the $8 million that he is right now. Kyle Rudolph, this possibly could have been resolved a lot earlier. The longer that this goes on, the longer that Garrett Bradbury isn't signed, and the longer and the bigger that this could potentially become a story talking about when are you going to sign your draft pick? When are you going to free up cap space in order to sign your first-round draft pick? That's deflecting, and that's a distraction away from the Vikings when it comes to simply football, okay? That's a distraction no matter what. So Anyway, something needs to happen with Kyle Rudolph. I think he's inevitably gone. Maybe the Patriots, that's the team that he may eventually go to. I've seen that name come up quite a bit as far as that organization. But something that's interesting is that I looked on Bleacher Report because after the Ian Rappaport tweet came out, Bleacher Report, they put up follow-up alerts on my phone. I followed my favorite teams, the Minnesota Vikings, the Dallas Mavericks, Washington Capitals, the Washington Nationals. And so this was actually written by Tim Daniels of Bleacher Report regarding the Kyle Rudolph situation. So he was pretty much reiterating everything that Ian Rappaport already said. But towards the end of that article, something caught my eye. So I'll read the entire paragraph. It's just two sentences long. Quote, Rudolph tallied 64 catches for 634 yards and 4 touchdowns in 2018, which marked the 4th consecutive year he's played all 16 regular season games for the Vikes. Not bad. He then went on to say, Pro Football Focus graded him, Kyle Rudolph, as the league's 35th best tight end last year. And I immediately, if I was drinking water or drinking some coffee or whatever it is, I would have spit it out immediately, especially on this computer. Who knows? My MacBook right here probably wouldn't be functional right now. The 35th best tight end in the league, and this is according to Pro Football Focus. I use them a lot. They're not the end-all, be-all. They're not necessarily right. They're definitely not right about this. I disagree with them sometimes, and that's kind of, I don't want to be a hypocrite because I do reference Pro Football Focus quite a bit, but more so it's to support what I see in the eye test. I'm not. And you know what? This kind of goes into big picture. If you're looking for, and I'm not trying to be an ass about this at all, but if you're looking for a show that's just all analytics and all these, crazy grades and stats, and that's why this go and nothing else, this isn't the show for you. I'm more of an eye test guy, and then I'll use stats to back it up instead of just solely stats. And this is why, and I'm eating stats and calculators for breakfast. That's just not what I do. That's not who I am. But I do reference Pro Football Focus quite a bit. But sometimes they're wrong, and they're wrong as hell about this right here. The 35th best tight end in the league. I get it. Kyle Rudolph, he leaves a lot on the table to be desired. There's a lot that he could do better, such as breaking tackles more consistently, making the defense earn their tackles, running with a little bit more power. I don't know if it's in his genetics or whatnot, but he's really, really consistent. He can run his routes. He can catch the ball. And you know what? I mean, if he's in open space, he can run, but that's really any football player that has the ball in their hand. I get that. He's not the 35th best tight end in the league. That's just disrespectful, because if you're saying he's the 35th best tight end in the league, you're basically saying after him, or not even after him, so take him away, the other 31 starting tight ends in the league are all better than Kyle Rudolph, along with 3 tight ends that come off the bench. So what, David Morgan on his own team, is he better than Kyle Rudolph? I don't agree with that at all. Kyle Rudolph is easily a top 10 tight end in the league. I don't get where this disrespect is coming from, or grades, whatever it is. You can't tell me he's a 35th. That's ridiculous, man. So top 10 in the league easily, but 35th, come on, man. But I will say this. Kyle Rudolph is a Honda Accord, okay? I used to drive a Honda Accord all throughout college. I drove it from the D.C., Maryland area up to New Hampshire. Did that for 4 years. I ran that Honda Accord into the ground with about 350,000 miles on it. The reason why I compare Kyle Rudolph to a Honda Accord is because even if you have a Honda Accord right now, my wife, she has a Honda. I have a Toyota. I have a Nissan as well. We do imported cars. American cars, you know what? I'm used to seeing them on the road. They usually have troubles with their mechanics early on. But imported cars like Hondas, they usually last forever. They're really easy to maintain yourself, especially you know what? If you decide you want to change your oil, if you want to give yourself a tune-up, change your spark plugs, if you want to change your timing belts, whatever it is, it's really easy to do on a Honda. Whereas American cars, it's like this big jigsaw puzzle that you're trying to fumble through, and it's like, oh, you don't want to make any mistakes, to where with the Honda, it's so easy to do your own maintenance, to where, okay, the only reason I'm taking it to a mechanic is because I don't have the time. It's convenient for someone else to take care of it. So I will give you money to take care of it because I don't have time to take care of it myself. But back to the point, Kyle Rudolph is a Honda Accord because let's say with my wife's Honda, if I go out there and turn that key in the ignition, it will start. That's number one. And number two is from point A, I will always get to point B with no issues, no pulling over on the side of the road. It's reliable every single time, and it will get you to where you need to go every single time. And it will last forever. It will last for a long ass time. That's Kyle Rudolph. Whereas if you compare Kyle Rudolph to, let's say, Rob Gronkowski, even with his injuries last year, Zach Ertz, Travis Kelce, even Greg Olsen with his injuries. Like those tight ends, and I guess more so specifically, let's keep it to Gronkowski. Now he's retired. Okay, fine. We're talking about 2018. Gronkowski, Zach Ertz, and Travis Kelce. So Kyle Rudolph, he's more of a Honda Accord, right? Those three guys, Ertz, Kelce, and Gronk, they're more like a Ford Mustang, like the Shelby Cobra, or a Chevy Camaro, or a Dodge Challenger. Just the American muscle cars, baby. And they're going to take off and get to 60 miles per hour in 1.3 seconds, whereas the Honda Accord is just slow and steady wins the race, baby. It takes about 10 seconds to get up to speed, whatever it is, but it's reliable. It's not as great as those high American muscle cars, but it gets the job done. The basic job that you need done from a car, the Honda Accord will do exactly that. And that's Kyle Rudolph. Kyle Rudolph is a top 10 tight end. Now, the tight ends that I would say are clearly better, and even to some degree where it's like, okay, you can make the argument, but they probably got the edge over Kyle Rudolph. Gronkowski last year, we're talking about 2018, Rob Gronkowski, Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz, Jordan Reed, even with his injuries, Trey Burton of Chicago, Greg Olsen, and George Kittle of the San Francisco 49ers, even though really they're in Santa Clara. I don't really get it. It's kind of like the Washington Redskins. They're not in Washington. They're in Landover, Maryland, but whatever. Those are the guys. So Gronk, Kelce, Ertz, Jordan Reed, Burton, Olsen, and George Kittle. Then I would put Kyle Rudolph there. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Kyle Rudolph, to me, is the 8th best tight end in the entire league. How do you justify coming up with the 35th best tight end? I just don't get that at all whatsoever. But something has to happen. Something has to give. You need to be able to sign your draft pick. The longer that this goes on, I just don't want this to become a big story. You need to be able to sign Garrett Bradbury. This all could have been managed earlier in the offseason. Instead, we're now trying to panic and possibly make a trade. I know that Rick Spielman will make something happen. He's not going to let Garrett Bradbury just not play. He's not going to not have him on the roster. Something's going to happen, but this could have been solved a lot sooner than right now. We'll see. If a trade breaks out, I'll be sure to react to it. But you need to respect Kyle Rudolph, man. Top 10 tight end in the league, man. There's a lot to be desired, but he's still a pretty damn good tight end. He'll probably get like a fifth rounder or fourth round draft pick at best. We will see you on Monday.